Do you know what insanity is? As Far Cry 3 has turned it into a meme at this point, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting things to change, to have a different outcome, or the part that is relevant to us in this video, to expect the audience to be just as excited once they see the story resolve after going through the same story threads 4 times at this point. Sword Art Online games have so far offered us 5 stories, and all of these stories have one major issue in common that is exponentially growing with every single installment, and that is the threat burnout. Hi everyone, it's me GamerTurk, and this is my Fixing the Sword Art Online Gameverse series. In the first 2 episodes I was solely focused on Fatal Bullet alone, talking about the bad endings as well as the true ending of its campaign. Today, as promised, we are shifting over to a macro perspective, looking at the Gameverse as a whole and talk about the issue I mentioned at the beginning, the threat burnout, and I will be once again offering solutions to these issues for every single game. Before we begin, here's your spoiler warning for all Sword Art Online Gameverse entries, including Axel World vs Sword Art Online, as well as spoilers for the currently anime adapted Sword Art Online content, so Sword Art Online, Sword Art Online 2 and Ordinal Scale. If you haven't experienced all these stories of these products, this has been your chance to step away now. Now, my intro may have confused some of you to a certain extent, so let me start by explaining that. Insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome. Let's start with the outcome, since it is the shorter part. The purpose of stories is to incentivize people to think, to speculate, to excite, and to surprise. By definition, a surprise is a case, a plot twist so to say, resulting by a scenario going against your expectations. A surprise is what keeps a story engaging, since by nature we are drawn to stories that challenge our own thoughts, we are drawn to stories that we cannot come up with ourselves. That was the second part of the equation. Coming back to the first part, defining the thing can be very specific. To give an example, in an MMO, you can try soloing a dungeon, be unsuccessful, and try it again with the same loadout, same preparation, and same mental approach. Chances are, with all the parameters remaining the same, including your actions, you won't succeed. Or, the thing can be as vague as a general concept, being a threat that drives the story forward, and in the end, that very same threat completely blown over by the heroes with no payoff whatsoever. So far, the 5 Sword Art Online games introduced 4 life-threatening events with absolutely no end effect on said lives. The only exception being Lost Song, and I'll be talking more about that as we dive deeper. Now that we got both sides of the equation, we can visualize the insanity of Sword Art Online games as introducing a threat without any kind of payoff and expecting audiences to care about the so-called threat. As you keep introducing these threats without a payoff, audience becomes more and more numb to the situation as they realize the so-called threat is not really in danger. Sure, I mean, somebody who is not really used to looking at the big picture and is only living at the present time of a story and who does not attempt to have any kind of foresight about what may come next, this is not really a problem. Something exciting is going on the screen, and that is all some people need. The problem starts when we consider the vast majority of this audience who do have a wider perspective than just the present time, those people who like to consider the events of the past, as well as those who consider the future of a story in awe in terms of where the story can go next. Many people watching this will get the wrong idea here and assume I just want a darker Gameverse, and to that I say you have a very narrow outlook on how a story can progress. This is not about making the Gameverse take hits, this is about Gameverse knowing where it stands. To get a good grasp on some good examples, we can have a look at the main storyline from the anime series. Aincrad arc is of course the ultimate example of a threat payoff for the time being. The threat is established in the very first episode. You die in game, you die in real life. And of course we get to learn about the seriousness of this threat in the very same episode as well. Hundreds of people have already died trying to escape, and about 2,000 people died before even clearing the first floor boss. It's not just that we hear about these casualties. From a third-person standpoint, we also get to experience the situation. Kirito makes us believe in the weight of this threat, not being able to bear the responsibility of keeping Klein and his friends safe at the same time, effectively running away from the moral decision because of its implied consequences. We get to see multiple people die over the course of the arc. Diavel dies because of his greed and pride, Moonlit Black Cats die because of their complacency and friendship, including Sachi, Keita jumps off to the void outside of Aincrad, Shilika outright giving up on her life right before being saved by sheer fate, murder mystery episodes, army people during Gleam Ice fight, Godfrey who is killed by Kuradil, who is killed by Kirito to protect Asuna. Pretty much every second episode reminding you that the threat is real and the threat can affect anyone in this world. Hence why whenever we return to Aincrad, most people tend to get goosebumps when watching just because of the stakes attached to it as a concept, whether there are actual stakes or not. We understand why Asuna gets tense during Mother's Rosario upon the possibility of somebody dying, despite an in-game death meaning absolutely nothing in Alfheim Online. We understand why everybody gets so overworked in Ordinal Scale when they see the Aincrad bosses, and it is also why an incarnation of the Radius is one of the most chilling bosses we have encountered in the series. Not because it's visually impressive, not because it is OPSL, but because the threat sends chills to our spine. We do care about what happens in that scene because the threat feels very much real despite everybody knowing that things are going to be alright. That is because the threat payoff has already happened so many times in the series that we still do care about it despite knowing the truth. And now it's time to compare this to what we've been offered in the Gameverse. Aincrad Incident? Not a single payoff in the game that starts on floor 75. The only payoff is Strea being overtaken by the Hollow Avatar, but that payoff is nullified by replacing the Hollow Strea with the real Strea inside Hollow Avatar. Let's be real here. Sacrificing Hollow Strea was the boldest move Gameverse has ever done, which kinda speaks for itself. It's not very impressive. The one good part about the premise here is that Hollow Fragment actually makes use of this as a gameplay element, so at least they do indeed incorporate the danger in some way that has some meaning for the player as they get a game over screen upon death and are returned to their last save location. While this can be an annoyance to some, it is still a very well implemented mechanic that ties well into the story and there is no running away from the threat. Hollow Realization brings the premise that if an NPC dies, they don't respawn, they just get replaced by a new one. Now, try guessing how many NPCs have been formally introduced in the game and how many of them have been affected by this so-called threat. 4 of them have been introduced, namely Premier, Tia, Kismel and Zero. Though the problem is, none of them have been affected by this threat. So if the threat would not be utilized in any way, why was it there in the first place? It certainly doesn't affect the story progression since Premier and Tia still disregard the situation and run around in dangerous places during the story. As for the gameplay, yeah, it's kinda tied into the gameplay. If you bring out an NPC to the field and they die, they get replaced. The problem is, the 2 solutions that existed in Aincrad Arc exist for NPCs. You know, you can either go out onto the fields or you can stay safe in the town. In our case, you can just choose to not bring any NPCs outside with you, which the game already gives no reason for you to do so anyway, so logic dictates that you don't really bring any NPCs to the field. And this leads to the story premise having absolutely no effect on the story, as well as having absolutely no effect on the gameplay because it is such a minor feature, because let's be honest, nobody gives any fucks about that. So the question is, why provide a threat that has no meaning? Let me ask again. In Axel World vs Sword Art Online, there is a huge threat of erasing Yui from existence along with everything she has created in the future. The present Yui gets destroyed, but everything is fixed by overwriting the situation with a resetted version of the future Yui. Sure, that is some sort of a payoff, but the game does absolutely nothing with it to give you the idea that something has happened. According to the story, since she was reset, Yui no longer has any memories of the past. We have one event with her after that change that ends with Kirito and Asuna promising to tell her everything in detail, and that is pretty much it. From that point onwards, it's like this change never has happened. So again, what was the purpose of this threat in the first place if there would be no effects afterwards? Let me ask again. In Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet, we are presented with a finale where our OC Kureha, Zeliska and Itsuki have to wear nerve gears with the death penalty and face a boss. In bad endings, yeah, for once the threat actually pays off. For the first time in 5 games, we have a payoff to a threat. That's quite amazing. But don't get too excited because those endings are actually non-canon, hence they are meaningless because the true ending reveals that you can actually save everyone without a single casualty. So, I ask once again, what was the purpose of introducing nerve gears with death penalty if the threat was meaningless anyways? Let me ask again, what is the purpose of Death Gun if Kirito saves every single person he was supposed to kill in Phantom Bullet? Let me ask again, what is the purpose of Yuki having AIDS if she is supposed to get better and better every single game? Let me ask again, what is the purpose of a threat if the threat has no meaningful contribution to the story? Simple. Here's your answer. There is no reason. Hence why the game I do not like all that much, Sword Art Online Lost Song, becomes the perfect example here. There is nothing wrong with not including an imminent death tag to your game if that imminent death means absolutely jack shit. With every single SAO game, I get more and more blind to the threat itself, and instead of thinking, how is this threat gonna affect the story progression, I think more and more about, gee, how are we gonna foil the evil plan this time around? Lost Song has no reason for an artificial tension, so naturally, they just decided not to add a convoluted threat that may or may not kill our heroes. It could easily have been done, but it wasn't, and that was indeed for the better. And I also promised solutions for the other games as well, so let me deliver on that promise now. I won't touch on Hollow Fragment since that already operates on Aincrad Arc in general. We kinda know the threat is real, although that is no thanks to the game itself. However, Hollow Realization is an entirely different matter. I argued that the ending could have been much more impactful and a beautiful ending to Tia's arc if Tia would sacrifice herself to save Premiere. Her entire arc was about learning to trust and care for others, so during the final climax, Tia could finally have her breakthrough, see Premiere in danger, and in order to save her, she could sacrifice herself instead, showing that she finally cared about someone and was willing to give her existence away to save a friend. But of course, this being the Gameverse, some of you may find this to be an insult to the hunky-dory, happy-go-lucky Gameverse where nothing is allowed to get hurt, so here's my second fix suggestion. Just, simply not include the arbitrary NPC death gimmick in the damn game in the first place. It doesn't add anything to the game other than forcing certain interactions onto Premiere, which, Premiere ignores anyways. As I have articulated many times in this video, what is the point? There is none, so keep it away. Next up we have Axel World vs SAO, the game I hate because of the nonsensical logic behind time travel and the excessive use of unenjoyable fan service of its character stories. My suggestion for this: Yui was reset, right? Why does she still trust Kirito and Asuna so deeply if she was completely wiped? Why does she still refer to them as Mama and Papa? She just outright shouldn't. The game had an opportunity here to properly introduce a relationship between these characters, but in the end they just did exactly what was done years ago in the main series. She just does and everything is as if nothing happened. She should have had a proper reintroduction to everyone and build a brand new relationships in a proper manner, instead of, accepting everything that's been told to her as a fact and acting like nothing has happened in the first place. As for Fatal Bullet, it is once again so convoluted that I do not even know where to begin. Supposedly Itsuki sent everyone a nerve gear unit with a threat, but his plan was to show OC that their friends wouldn't show up. But if the friends didn't show up, would OC ever know that Zeliska and Kureha also received a threat? No, he wouldn't. Why would he? Apparently, Itsuki also had only 2 real nerve gears, and depending on the ending, you always have one of them and the other real nerve gear goes to either Kureha, Zeliska or Itsuki himself. At which point, one has to ask the question, why do we have this stupid gimmick? Why is there only 2 nerve gears? You know what's worse than committing yourself to either having a threat or not having a threat? Not committing yourself to anything at all. Jesus, just send everyone a damn nerve gear. The story of the game already takes care of who dies and who survives within the game itself. You don't need to convolute the story by having only 2 nerve gears and changing up who receives the real one. The person who dies in the game has received the true nerve gear. What's the point of this? And again, what is the point of actually sending real nerve gears? Like, you know, based on his plan, Itsuki sure as hell doesn't wanna die, he just wants to showcase he is willing to make sacrifices for the OC, so why does he have to be wearing a real life nerve gear? He just needs to say that he has a real nerve gear. That's pretty much it, that solves the issue. In addition to that, Itsuki doesn't want to kill the OC in the first place, so why is he sending him a real nerve gear in the first place? Like, what? His plan does not benefit in any way by having real nerve gears involved, because things would have worked just fine by having all nerve gears be modified hemispheres instead of, you know, 2 being real and 2 being modified. Just remove the damn nerve gear aspect from the game completely, have all 4 of them be modified hemispheres presented as nerve gears, and nothing would change in the story. You would only have a bit more consistency and less stupidity involved. But yeah, that's pretty much it, all I can say about this issue. As I said, this video was never about killing off characters to provide a credible threat. This was more about providing less amounts of meaningless threats, so the concept of a threat would not be undermined as it has been till now. I really do hope the next game either stops providing these useless threats or make it actually count for once. Next week I will be talking about the overbloated cast and how this affects storytelling and presentation aspects of the games. Much like this week, my solution won't be killing off half of the characters, but rather about properly structuring the stories to properly accommodate the cast. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon to get notified once that video goes up. Also, my second alternative GGO video will be up this weekend as well after episode 5, so keep an eye out for that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and comment. If you enjoy my content, do support me on patreon.com/gamerturk and help me have more creative freedom and increase the quality and frequency of these videos. And of course, a huge shout out to Tiffany, who has been my patron for 5 months now. Remember that you can also find me on Twitter at gamerturk95 and on facebook.com/gamerturk. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.